Hi, this is Steve Wright, welcoming you to this week's Nuke Nugget, how to make a master disable control panel to turn off selected nodes in order to speed up your shot development. When your Nuke script gets heavy with lots of nodes, it can slow down your shot development because of the slow screen refresh times. By disabling selected heavy nodes, you can dramatically speed up your shot development time. Now, we'll be using user knobs that we learned about in episodes 44 and 45, so if you want to review those first, you go right ahead. Now, we learned in episode 39 that you can select a backdrop node and then type D on the keyboard to disable the entire block of nodes that are on that backdrop. However, that turns off that entire section, not necessarily just the heavy nodes. So this is a more surgical approach. We're going to just be turning off the heavy nodes that are slowing us down. So let's take a look at how it works. I've made my master disable here. We'll open that up. Now here I have a bunch of checkboxes that, as you can see over here, I've got wired to a whole bunch of nodes. So let's take a look at what we got and how it works. Then we'll see how to set it all up. Now, these links can be a little bit untidy, so we can show and hide the links with the Alt-E command on the keyboard. Kind of clean things up, but I'm going to leave them on for purposes of this little demo. So if I come over here to the color correction and I turn that on, I am disabling all my color correction. Look at that. Now what's happening is, you can see right here, this and this and that. This is actually wired to 3 different color correction nodes. Now color correction nodes aren't typically heavy. This is illustrating the technique. So I'll turn those back on. But here's a good one, motion blur. Motion blur really slows down your comps. So this can be very helpful to speeding up your development time. Turn that one off. Now the burn-in is this text down here to document the rev number and the frame number. So we can turn that on and off with a node quite nicely. Now rotos, this turns off all the rotos in here, and you can see I'm hitting several nodes with that one. Roto nodes are not very often really heavy, but paint nodes can be. So we don't have any paint nodes in this one, but I just wanted to put this up here as a little reminder for you. All right, now that we've seen the utility of it, let's see how to build it and use it. So I'm going to delete all of these guys right here. Yes, make them go away. And bring over an identical copy so that we can build it from scratch. So I'm going to hook my viewer node up to the bottom of my node graph. We'll get our same picture back. So let's build this thing together. Now you can use any node you want to create the tab, but I like to use a no-op, so I have a dedicated node just for this. So I'm going to click right here on my flow graph, hit the tab key, and type no-op. And that'll create a no-op node right there for me. First thing I'm going to do is rename this as master disable. Now we're ready to start adding our user knobs. So cursor anywhere not in the fields here, right mouse pop up, manage user knobs, and we get the dialog box. So I'm going to add a checkbox. Now I'm going to start by doing the text burn-in. Remember, the name field is just the variable that will be used in the link. So we'll just make that something really short like text, TXT. The label is what you're going to see in the tab. So we'll call that burn-in. And if you want to put in a tooltip, you can. Click OK. And now I have my user tab with my burn-in checkbox. Okay, let's see how to use it. Let's click Done. And let's go find our text burn-in node. There it is, Mr. Text Burn-in. So I'm going to Command or Control double click on that to open up a floating window. We switch to the Node tab, and here's the Disabled button right there. Watch the text disappear as I turn my Disable on and off. Okay, so I want to hook this burn-in checkbox to the Disable checkbox. So from the master disable, Command or Control click, drag. When you see the green plus, drop. Okay, now this checkbox, it controls that one. So it's on and off, on and off. Okay, well that was easy. So let's close this. And by the way, you see this diagonal slash? That's the indicator you get when you have disabled a node using an expression. So here we go. See? There. If you disable it manually, you get the big X. If you disable it procedurally, you just get the 1/. Next up, let's rehome our node graph, and let's do something about these roto nodes. Okay, we got a couple of them right here, roto 2, roto 7. So let's get those guys working. I'll undo my burn in there. Okay, so manage user knobs. We will add a checkbox. These are for my roto nodes. So I'm going to call them roto will be the variable name. The label will be roto nodes. No tooltip right now. Click OK. Done. And there is my new roto checkbox. So what I'm going to do is, selecting this roto node, Command or Control double click to open him up. Select the Node tab, and there is the Disable button. So I'm going to Command or Control, click and drag, green plus, drop, close. Open up the other one. Switch to the Node tab, Roto Nodes checkbox, Command or Control, click, drag, and drop. Close. Now, when I click on my roto nodes, they both disable. Sweet. Let's take a look at a more interesting example. The motion blur thing, right? Motion blur is extremely expensive. So this particular node here, this transform node, has some motion blur in it. So let's see how we might do that. Back over to my master disable. Right mouse pop-up. Manage user knobs. Let us add another checkbox. This one we're going to call Mo Blur, and the label will be Motion Blur. And we don't need any tooltips. Click OK. Done. Now here's the interesting thing about this Motion Blur button. I can hook that to a dozen different transform nodes, okay? But we'll just show you the one. All right, so transform exterior, double click to open it up. So here's my motion blur. And remember, with motion blur set to 0, you get no motion blur. With it set to 1, you get motion blur. All right, so we'll put that back to 0. So I'm going to take the motion blur checkbox, Command or Control, click, drag, and drop onto the motion blur window. Now we get to see what the checkbox actually outputs. With it turned off, you get a 0. If I turn it on, you get a 1. So that's really what the checkbox is doing. 0 if it's off, 1 if it's on. However, in this case, I've got it off, which means I'm not disabling motion blur, but it is disabling the motion blur. So in other words, the motion blur field is doing the opposite of what I'd like to see when I do my checkbox. When I check this on, I want to see the motion blur disabled. When I turn it off, that means I'm doing motion blur. A trivial fix. So let's come over here, select that field, type equal to edit the property panel, and we'll just add a 1 minus in front of that, and click OK. Now that's just inverted the output. Now watch what happens. If I say disable it, I get motion blur 0, which is what I want. If I don't disable it, I get 1, so that enables my motion blur. Okay, we'll close this guy here, and now let's do a little bit of cleanup. So let's go back to managing our user knobs, and let's say that the roto nodes are the heaviest ones, and I want to turn them on and off all the time. So I'm going to select my roto, and I'm going to click up to put it at the top of the list. You'll notice it immediately updates my user tab. The other thing I'd like to do is rename the user tab. So let's select this guy, click edit, and what you see here is what's in this window here. So let's put disable in there. Click OK. Done. Okay, now I have a disable tab, and as I turn each of these items on, it'll disable the respective thing, saving me an enormous amount of rendering time. So there you have it. Faster shot development by making a master control to selectively disable nodes with a single click. Be sure to check in next week so you don't miss out on my next Nuke Nugget.